So it's lesson 5. We've done our lab in groups, which is posted now to OneDrive. So I've given everybody who's participated their marks, and you can use that file as a reference moving forward in working with Git. Okay, so what we want to do now is add some style. I know this isn't really PHP related, but we want to look at integrating some CSS into the application we've built. How many of you have worked with the Twitter Bootstrap CSS framework before? Probably some of you have and some of you haven't. Anybody use Bootstrap? No? Yes? No? Yes? Yes? A little bit? Okay, so some yes, some no. So it's called Twitter Bootstrap, was originally created a long time ago, created by some designers at Twitter, and then they published it as an open source project. So it's a really easy way to very quickly build a responsive website without having to do your own CSS. So many sites today, they use Bootstrap as a basic framework, and then they customize their own CSS on top of it. So we'll use kind of basic Bootstrap first, and then later on in the class, we'll maybe make some customizations to it. So a couple things. So it was designed to be lightweight, to be responsive. So when we use Bootstrap, they're one of the companies that popularized, the little hamburger mobile friendly menu. And so Bootstrap comes with a lot of components. Yes, it's free to use. Comes with many components, and we can just have a look at. So it has a basic. The documentation's quite good. It has a basic kind of 12 column system. So if we want something to say take up a width of half of our screen, we would make it 6 columns wide. If you wanted it to take up 2/3 of the screen, you'd make it 8 columns wide, for example. So lots of different pre-built components that we can integrate and then customize. So things like we want for example, sticky footer. So we want a footer that appears at the bottom of our page. Okay, not sure why that link is working. Yes, it's totally ready to use. So for example, if we want something like, we're going to use some of the things like for content, we'll want to use some of their classes for styling a table, right? We have a movies table in our project. So it's got some different color schemes we can use. So we'll want to use, if we want to have alternating background. No, it's not. It's open source. So we are free to use it. It's got components like pre-built navigation bars. So we're going to include, so if we want a nav bar with an image and it gives us the code, we can just copy and paste and customize. So we're going to use a number of these components, and then later on we can come up with our own color scheme and our own style sheet that will sit on top of Bootstrap. So many sites, they use Bootstrap for the basic components, and then we're customizing on top. So how do we get Bootstrap? Well, first thing to do is use the link on Blackboard right here. Click, it'll take you here to getbootstrap.com. Now there's several ways you can get Bootstrap. I'm going to click on this download button. They're currently on version 5. So the easiest way is actually just to use the content delivery network. So we can download the files locally. So the Bootstrap bundle, it includes a couple of files. There's a CSS file. It also includes a JavaScript file, because the CSS supports some animations. So it uses this JavaScript to, for example, things like accordion opening and closing, for example, or progress bars will use JavaScript. So I could download the files and extract them, or I can just use the content delivery network. That's probably easier. So I'm just going to scroll down. So on the download page, we'll put the link directly in the chat. If you scroll part way down, there's CDN via JS deliver. And I can just mouse over this section and there's a copy button. So I'm just going to copy that code. And now we can open up our PHP Flicks application and we can paste this in somewhere. So I need to connect to the VPN and then start up XAMPP, and then we can open up our project, and then we can start getting to work and incorporating Bootstrap. So I'm connected to the VPN, so make sure you go ahead and do that. I'm going to open up XAMPP as usual. I'm going to start my Apache server. And then I'll go back to Visual Studio Code, and then I will open up the PHP Flicks application. We need the VPN because the database is on AWS. So I could load the home page without the VPN, but we won't be able to load any of the pages that use our database. So we'll open up PHP Flicks. So maybe I'll just close up all my files. The only file I want open right now is my movies file. So open up the movies file. For the moment, we will just add the Bootstrap links here. So I'll just load my project for a minute. So if I go to localhost, PHP Flicks, movies.php, this is how our page looks right now, right? There's no styles to it. So I'm going to copy the links from the content delivery network. I'm going to copy that and paste it in to the head section of the movies.php. So I'm opening my movies file. Underneath my title, I'll just put in a comment. This is our Bootstrap from the content delivery network. And I'm going to paste those two links in here. I can, Hamid, but you need to go to the Bootstrap site because there's going to be a bunch of other stuff we're going to be taking from here. So you should be grabbing it. I would recommend it would be better that you're on the Bootstrap site and you get it from here. It's also good that you know where to find it here, because if you want to use this, for example, in your assignment, you're going to have to go back here and get it. So I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to point you in the right direction. Okay. So go here, scroll down to the CDN via JS deliver. There's also a little link here. It says on this page, here's the subnav. So if you click CDN via JS deliver, it'll bring you to this part. And it's this section right here, under where it says skip the download with JS deliver to deliver cached versions of Bootstrap's compiled CSS and JS to your project. And there's a copy button. Okay, so now I've pasted it in. So I'll keep my old version of the movies page open so we can compare. I'm going to open it, the same page in a new tab, and you'll notice a few things, right? So here's our version without Bootstrap. Once I apply the CSS links, what things do you notice are different right away by adding that CSS file? Yep, our table. Yep, we don't get the grid lines, and we get a different default font. That's right. Yep. So let's apply. If we go and look now in the Bootstrap docs, if I go to Content and Tables, you can click on Content and Tables. They've got some examples. So let's try adding a few of the table classes that come with Bootstrap. So in this example here, they've used class equals table, and that gives us some grid lines. It also should make the headings bold. So I'm going to we added this border equals 1 and width equals 100%. We can take that out. We're not going to use those attributes anymore because we're going to use Bootstrap instead. Oh, on the documentation, you can see here, on the left, I opened up content, and then tables is here. So I use the sub nav on the left, content, tables. So I'm going to take out correct. When you use the content delivery network, these are compiled cached versions. So we are linking to them, but because they're compiled and they're cached, they tend to be faster than local CSS. Or they can be. If you want, you can download these files directly. We could create a CSS directory and you could download them in here if you want to. But this is just an option that we can use this CSS without actually having to download it. So now I'm going to add to my table, I'm going to add class equals table. So this is a built-in class name in the Bootstrap framework. So I've replaced that border equals 1 and width equals 100. I'm going to use the class table definition. Okay, so I've modified line 13. And if I refresh now, we get a faint gray line underneath each row. Where did I get these links? Okay, I'll show you one more time how to get them. Go back to the main homepage for Bootstrap. The link is right here on Blackboard, which is Bootstrap CSS Framework. It'll take you to the Bootstrap homepage, which is getbootstrap.com. There's a download button right here, this gray download button. I clicked it. And then I scrolled down on this page that's on the download page. I scrolled down to this section that says CDN via JS deliver. And there's a copy button right here. That's okay. And then I just pasted those links. I added a comment and I pasted them into the header of my movies page. And then we can start to use some of the classes. So we'll start with the table class. And one of the nice things the table class does, it also always scales our tables to 100% width by default. Again, if you want to override it, you can, but I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to add a couple more of the table classes that come with Bootstrap. So I'm going to go back to under the content section here. I clicked on tables. So we've used this class equals table, and now our table looks pretty much like the one in the sample documentation. We get a little gray border underneath. But there's some other things we can do. So we could have different colors. We can have what are called accented tables with striped rows. So if we add table-striped, we'll get alternating rows of gray and white background. So let's add I'm going to add table-striped into the class definition as well. So I'm going to use table, but now I'm also going to add table-striped. So this should change our table from all white background to alternating white and gray backgrounds. So I just add a space after the first class definition. Now I'm going to add table stripe. Yeah, you can play around. By all means, if you want to add the dark one, add the dark one. So now I refresh. And now we get those alternating rows. And I'm going to add one more class. Yeah, if you wanted it to be green, so Bootstrap, yeah, absolutely, you can use Bootstrap for someone. I would encourage you, but I will encourage you use different classes or different options from what we do in class, so the two sites don't look exactly the same. So Bootstrap, we'll look at the colors in a minute. So for example, they use the success class for green. So if you wanted green table, you could use table-success. We'll look at the different color options. And then they've also got this table-hover. So when you move your mouse over a row, the background color changes. So I want to add that as well. So I will add table-hover. So now I've got a striped table that also has the rollover effect. So now when I refresh, when I move my mouse over the rows, I also get that hover effect. Paramveer, I'll get to your question in just a second. So Bootstrap has certain colors already kind of predefined that we can use. Search for color. So by default, it uses these class names represented by these different colors. So if we want something to be royal blue, we can use primary, whether it's a button or a table row. If you want something green, we use success. We'll use the danger class later for error messages. Info is for information, like instructions. But again, we can customize these colors, and it shows you the hex values. So we'll play around with this a bit more later. Well, how do we debug errors? Well, I mean, you would probably the best way is use your inspector, right? So here I've got, click on my table class. So it shows, we can see the class definitions from the Bootstrap CSS. Yeah, and we'll look at some tools for including our own color scheme or customizing what is here with Bootstrap. We can use something like you've used it before, we'll maybe do it later. You know, you can go to the Adobe color wheel to find complementary colors, for example. You can find palettes this way, where it shows you. There's also neat tools like this one from the Google design world, where you can find palettes. Like, you know, my customer, let's say my customer has this red color. And if I pick red and gray, it will build a palette and give me the hex values. So there's all kinds of neat tools out there to help us, and we'll maybe use one of these to customize the color palette of our site. The Bootstrap site says to add T-body. Yeah, so we do have a T-body here. So you could add a class onto the body if you wanted. Okay, so there's we've added to our table. We can also add Bootstrap to our form, because right now our form looks like this. So Bootstrap has some classes as well. Again, if we go to Forms, Overview, right, we can see some samples. So let's style our form using some Bootstrap classes. So the first thing we will do is we'll need to copy our Bootstrap CSS links. I'm going to copy those from my movies page. And I'll open up the movie details page, and I'm going to paste those into the header as well. So the same two links, I'm just copying them, the CDN links from the movies page. I'll copy them. I'm going to open up movie details, and I will paste them into the header here. So if I refresh the form, right away we can see some changes. Belinda, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. Can you clarify? Where does the formatting come from, you mean? Like, sorry, maybe you could use your mic and clarify. I'm just not sure I understand what you're asking. Those are the links to the from the Bootstrap CDN, right? If we want to use the style sheet, I went to download and I copied the links to the content delivery network. So instead of downloading the style sheet to our computer and including it in our project, we're linking to it from over the internet on the content delivery network. So I've just used these same links on both pages now. So now we can add some classes to clean up the formatting on our form. So for example, I think one thing we may want to do is we want to make all of our labels the same width so that our form inputs are all aligned. We can also style our save button. So in my field set, actually we'll start here. On our label, I'm going to give it a class. And I said Bootstrap lays out, it has a grid system and it makes every screen 12 columns wide. So if I use a class of call2 on all of the labels, then all the labels should be 2 columns wide. So I'm going to try this on my first couple of label tags. So this class definition, it's in the Bootstrap library. So if I add class of call to call-2 to both my title and rating, then those should now be the same width and the input boxes should be aligned. I'll try it out and see. Shrink it down so we can see. So now you'll notice each of these inputs are now aligned because I've set the width. Each label is going to be 2 columns wide. So I also want to apply it to my release year label and my genre label. So I'm going to add that class of call-2. So all 4 of my labels now have this, they're all the same width. If you put it inside the field set, well, 2 is going to be too narrow. That's going to make each field set the same width, but it won't align the left edges of our inputs. Okay, so I wanted my inputs aligned. Now they're also kind of jammed together. So I do want to add a class to the field sets as well to add a little margin or padding. Okay, so we've added, first class we've added here is call-2. I'm going to use a different class on the field set. The Bootstrap has a class called form-group. I'm going to try that class on my field sets. And we'll have a look and see what this does. And there's a lot of trial and error. We try a class, maybe we try 2 columns. We say it's too wide. We try 1 column. So there's a fair bit of trial and error, especially as you're learning and exploring the classes. I've used Bootstrap for many years. I still have to do a lot of experimentation with it. Okay, that didn't really work, did it? So I'm going to undo that. Instead, I'm going to use a class of M-5. So that should give it a margin. I'm going to try that instead. I'll try it on my first field set, a 5-pixel margin around the field set. That might be too big, it might be too small, I don't know. Yeah, too big. Let's try an M margin of 1. So in my first field set, I'm going to try the Bootstrap class M1. Yeah, that's probably better. Just a little bit of space. So I'm going to add to each field set. Well, I can tell you right away that 2 columns is too small for the field set. Remember, our Bootstrap system, it's 12 columns wide. A label and an input, they're clearly going to take up more than 1/6 of the screen. So I know call2 is going to be too small for the entire field set, because each field set is actually about 1/3 of the screen. So it's probably going to be at least a call3 or call4. And I can put it on. I don't know that we'll actually see anything. I'll just try this as an experiment because you're asking. Sure, why not? Let's try it. So I'll put in a call2 here. Let's see what this gives us. Lots of trial and error when we're playing around with CSS classes. So see, it squishes them together because it limits it. So call2 for the whole field set, it's too small. You can see it's all jammed together. So I'm going to use M1 around my field sets. So each field set will have a margin on all sides of 1. Okay, so our labels will be 2 columns wide. So that's going to align our inputs, the left edge of our inputs. And we'll add a margin of 1 around each field set. So at a small scale, you'll notice my release year label, it wraps. But when my screen is relatively wide, it displays at full scale. It's not creating two columns. If you use call to, it means the field set is 1/6 of the width of the screen, because the screen is represented by 12 columns. So when you use call to and assign that class to an element, like here, it means this element should be 1/6 of the total width of the screen. Should depend on scale. Your browser might also be caching your changes. So I have to hit Control F5 to load it without changes. Now we want to do a couple things with the button as well. I think we should move the button. I want the button to be over here instead. So what I want to do is I want to offset my button by 2 columns. I want to put 2 columns to the left of the button so my button is aligned under the form inputs. Well, if it's still shorter, you could try call 3 on your screen. See if it looks better. So I'm going to go down to my button. I'm going to move it over. I don't think 1 column is wide enough for release year. Because it's only 1/12 of the screen. So you could try, we could try. Again, sure, good question. Why don't we try 1 column and see? If I use call 1, I think what happens is at full scale, my release year label is going to wrap. I don't think 1/12 of the screen is wide enough for my widest label. I'll try it and see. Oh, okay. Actually, it is okay like that. But very quickly at a smaller resolution, it wraps. So you could use 1. Does look okay. Actually, maybe 1 looks better. So you have to experiment a little bit. So I want to offset my button by 1 column. I want 1 column. All of these labels are 1 column wide. I want basically a 1 column of padding, and I want my button to show up here. So I'll use a Bootstrap class to move my button, and then we'll style the button. So I'll add class equals offset -1. Shawshank, we'll do that in a minute. Yes. No, Tyler, you can't. Good question, but the classes are only 1 to 12. Now, there are some other options in terms of sizing for different resolutions. So if I use this offset 1, this should move my button underneath my inputs. So when I refresh, my button is now here. I probably need a little margin as well because it's not quite aligned. So say offset 1 and also margin of 1. Okay, no, I didn't want to do that. Okay, forget that. I'll have to figure out the margin. We'll leave it as offset 1. Well, yes, you do. Yeah, you could try a pad. There is, I think, a P1, I think, for padding. I could try that. Offset 2 would put it over here. It would put it in the 3rd column. Now, the padding didn't quite work. I'll figure that out. If you did offset 2, right, it's over here now. I kind of want it towards the left edge. The larger the offset, the farther to the right the element is going to move. So you have the columns. I think the issue is the inputs in this column are wider than one column. They're more like 2 columns wide. Yeah, if you put in offset 2, it puts the button in the 3rd column. Well, we eyeball it by, remember, our screen is 12 columns wide. Okay, so there's more explanation. You can read more about the grid system here. Okay, so if you go to layout and grid, you can read a bit more. So it uses Flexbox. So there's a detailed description here. They also give you options about sizing for different size screens. I'm not going to go into this, but you can look at the documentation here. Yes, offset puts a column to the left. So it's how many columns you want on the left side of the object. So I've offset the button by 1, meaning put the button in the 2nd column. Okay, correct. So there's lots of examples here that you can see where they show you the output and they show you the HTML and what classes to use. Okay, so that's all described under layout. Now the whole thing's kind of anchored up here in the top left. So there is another class we can use called the container. So if we add a container around our whole page or around our main section, this will kind of move things, give us a little bit of padding here from the top left. So what I'm going to do inside of my body, I'm going to add a main tag with class equals container. And then I'm going to move all of the content inside of the main. So I'm going to take my ending main tag all the way down inside my closing body tag. So now all that HTML on our page, it lives inside of the main tag. And this container class will give us a little bit of padding on the page so things aren't jammed right up in the top left of the screen. Then you probably haven't closed a tag, if that's the issue. So that'll gives us some padding on our left by using that container tag. We can also use one of the classes to style our button. So we can go and check under components. There's description of different buttons. So these are the different colors. So we use the BTN class to get a button. And then we've got these different color definitions. So you could use any color you want. Any of these classes, BTN primary is blue. So we can use any one of these. Maybe I'll use this BTN secondary and make my buttons gray. So on my button class, I'm going to add BTN and BTN. I'll use dash secondary. That's going to turn my plain HTML button, which is light gray with black text. This BTN secondary should make it a charcoal gray with white text. And I should get nice rounded corners. So I'll use BTN and then BTN dash secondary. And now I get this little more modern looking button. So instead of spending time designing my own style sheet, I can simply leverage some of the classes that are in Bootstrap, and all of the examples and classes you need, they're all in the documentation, they're all in the documentation. So if there's something you want to see how to style, we can simply look up that element, like we want, for example, an alert, which we will use, or we want, breadcrumb styling. It's got all the classes, or things like badges, like notifications. It's got classes for this. Yeah, we use the class, thanks Tyler, the main class of container, or the class, and I applied it to the main attribute. So combined with Bootstrap, we can do one other little thing. We'll do one more thing to customize. Actually, you know what? We could even, let's try one. We'll do two quick things. We'll try one of these alert components. So let's say we want to print like an instruction at the top of our form saying like all fields are required. We could print an alert message up at the top. Then we could also customize the font. So let's do that. So on our movie details, underneath my H1, but between my heading that says movie details and my form, we'll just put on a paragraph, and I'll use the class of alert, and then alert dash, and then I can pick one of these colors. So here are the different alerts. So if I use, let's say, this, what would it be? Alert info, it'll use this kind of light blue background in my message. Say alert info is complete all fields. So I'll just put this little paragraph, or I could use, actually I could even use probably instead of a paragraph, I could use a heading tag as well, right? Like I could make this an H2 if I wanted. That might make more sense. Doesn't really matter if I make it a paragraph tag or an H2 tag. It's a section heading, but I'm going to style it as an alert. So the text will be blue, but it will also get a light blue background, and it will span most of the page. I'm going to add that. We'll see how it looks. Okay, so now I get this instruction. H2 is a little big. Maybe I want to shrink that down. Try something like smaller heading. Maybe a 5th level heading instead. There, that looks better. And I want to do one other thing. Maybe I want to go and grab a font, kind of a better looking font than the default font that comes with Bootstrap. So there's lots of places we can go and grab a font for free. Again, I'm going to go to Google Fonts, and they also have a content delivery network. So we can just use a live online link to the Google Content Delivery Network and use a custom font. So I will go to fonts.google.com. Put the link in the chat. So go to fonts.google.com, find a font that you like for our PHP Flicks application. Okay, I think I'm going to use, I like this one here. You can pick any font. I think I'm going to use this Rubik font. Never tried it before. So I'll just click on it. And then there's different styles, different weighting. If you scroll down, I'll just pick the regular 400 italic, regular 400. And beside any font, you can pick any one you like. You click on select this style. And then it says, if you want to embed a font, just copy this into your HTML. So it's a link to the Google Font library. And then it'll tell us we just want to add this to our CSS. So I'm going to just copy that link. I'm going to add it into the header of my page. Our Google Font. So I'm going to paste in those. It actually gives me 3 links. To Google Fonts. And then it tells us to add this CSS rule. So what I'm going to do is put this, well, for now, I guess I could put it right in my movie details page. Later on, we'll put it in a shared style sheet that all our pages use. I guess we could even do that. So then I'm going to copy this to CSS rules to specify families. So down at the bottom here, it lists the font family. So just copy that to your clipboard. We'll have to look at Bootstrap Fonts. Not sure. Good question. So I'm going to copy that. And then what I will do here, I'm going to make a new folder. Sorry, I'm going to make a new folder in my project called CSS. So we're going to create our own style sheet that we will use in combination with Bootstrap. Because we don't always want to use just maybe Bootstrap doesn't have all the classes we like, or we want to override some of the things. So now in here, I'm going to make a new file. Just call it styles.css. So I've got a CSS folder, and now we've got our own style sheet as well. I will paste in here. I'll just set the body tag. And then I'm going to paste in from Google Fonts the name of the Google font I want to use. So this is going to be the default font for all pages. Okay, so I just grabbed this, copied it from the very bottom right here when I picked my font. So I've linked to the Google Font style sheets, and now I've copied this rule with my selected font, copied it into my body tag. Now there's just one more step. My Google font isn't going to be visible yet. If I go back and refresh the page, the font hasn't changed yet. We've got one last step. What else do we have to do so that the page, rather than using the default Bootstrap font, it can use my Rubik font? That's right, Chushing. We can just link in our style sheet. So I'll go to movie details. And now I'll add, our custom CSS. So I'm just going to link in our own style sheet. And our own style sheet is setting the font for all page bodies tags to use that Rubik Google font. So now when I reload my page, right now we can see the font's changed. And it's using this font I've picked from Google instead. So I've written 0 lines of CSS. We're leveraging the Bootstrap framework and Google Font to start to customize the look of our site. So this is great for people like me. I know how to put sites together, but I'm not super skilled with CSS, and I don't have much in terms of design skills. So I can use frameworks like this, and later on, I might do something like, so I'd customize my color palette and come up with a color scheme. But we can start to customize the look of our site without actually having to do our own CSS. If you love to design CSS, that's fine. You still can, but you can do it on top of Bootstrap because Bootstrap will help out with the layout system, the mobile responsiveness, etc. So many sites are a combination of a framework like Bootstrap and custom CSS. Somebody asked about fonts. Yeah, so it comes basically with just this native font. So it doesn't, I don't believe Bootstrap offers a series of different fonts. So if you want fonts, place like Google Fonts is a good place to get them. Yeah, I will post these. Let me see, I may have actually posted these to Blackboard already under links and resources. Okay, there's the link for Bootstrap. Yes, I will put them in tools and resources. I'll put things like the Adobe Color Wheel, which is also cool because you can even upload a photo and it will extract the theme from a photo and give you the colors. If you then want to use them, it'll give you the hex values, which is pretty neat. And the material design palette. Yes, I'll post all the links we've used onto Blackboard. Okay, so we'll do more with this. I know, obviously, we want to share the CSS stuff. Embedding it directly in our details forms, not very efficient. We will look at fixing this up later. So we'll have a layout file, basically, or a header, and we'll also include, later on, we'll include a Bootstrap navigation bar. I think we've done enough with it for today, but we'll look at how do we include a nav bar and then share it among all the pages of our site. Be a much more efficient than putting our CSS directly into our pages. Okay, so I will post all those links. There's one last thing I want to do with this, and then what I'll do is stop the recording, and I will stick around in the room if people need help on their assignments. But several people asked about this on their assignment, so I do want to go over it now on the movies page. We're going to make one little coding addition here. Several people emailed and said, I'm working on my assignment and I don't want to know, how do I represent? So every movie we have right now is connected to a genre, right? But they're connected by the ID. So it would be easy on our movies page right now. We could print out the genre ID, but how do we print out the genre name? Because the genre name is in a different table. So we're just going to look at this quickly. And then you're free to go. You're also free to stick around in the room if you want help with your assignments. I'm going to go back to my movies page. And let's add a fourth column here for genre. So I've got these 3 TH tags in my T-head section. I'm going to add a fourth column for genre. And then down here in our loop, when we fetch each movie, we can also display, right now we can display the genre ID. This is just temporary. Okay, so I've added code. You can see I've got these little green indicators here. I've added line 19 and I've added line 37. So before our table showed 3 columns, it's now going to show 4 columns. It's going to have a genre heading at the top right, and every movie is going to display a genre ID. Shrink this down so you can see the code and we can also see the result. Okay, so line 19 and line 37. So now we've got 4 columns. Unfortunately, this genre ID, this is pretty useless, right? Nobody knows what genre ID 1, 2, or 3 means. So this it's not very helpful to show our users the ID, some ID number. It doesn't mean anything to them. So how do we fetch and display the genre name when it's in a different table? You don't have to do this in your assignment, but several people have asked me, how do I do it? So number one is we have to change our query. We want the movie data, but we also want the genre data. So what we need to do is we need to join them together based on the genre ID. Remember, there's a relationship between the movies and the genres table. Right? Every movie has a genre ID. Yeah, that's the logic of the foreign key. That's exactly right. So you guys will probably do this in your database class soon, right? You'll join tables together so you can query multiple tables at once. So we do that using this syntax. Okay, you've already done it. So we're going to use the inner join syntax. So we're going to join genres on movies, and we are going to connect the foreign key to the primary key. So not only are we fetching the movies, but we are also fetching the related genre for each movie. And these tables are joined from the genre ID, that's our foreign key in the movies table. It's going to be linked to a primary key in the genres table. The references is generally done when we are creating the primary key. We don't need to use references when we're running a query. So we use the references keyword when we built the foreign key. So now instead of my genre ID here, we should be able to select, well, let's try it this way. We want to try to print out the name column from the genre table. We may have to modify our query a little bit, but we'll try it this way. I think we may have to, but we'll see. So now we're displaying the title, rating, and release year from the movies table and the name value in the related record in the genres table. Correct. It links the two tables together based on the matching genre ID in each table. So then we have access to the values in both tables. So this is a very simple example of a join. We often have much more complex. The genre is included by the join. So we have access to the genre name this way. So we may have very complex queries with lots of joins. I might even have a quick example I can show you in an old database I've got of what this might look like. Sometimes we have really complex queries. This doesn't seem to want to connect right now. Okay, thought I had an example, but maybe it'll open. Oh, it will. So we might join, there's no limit to how many tables you can join. If you need 20 tables in your query, and I might have an example like that to show you, we can continually join on those primary and foreign keys. Might have a complex query here. Right, so here's a query where we've got nested selects, and then we're actually joining queries together. So that's a pretty long SQL query, 86 lines. But the process is the same. We're joining one table on another one based on a primary key, foreign key relationship. So I know a number of people had asked, how do I do this in my assignment? So I will put this code up on GitHub for you to reference. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and go take a quick break. I will come back at 10:15. And if you need help on your assignment, then I will stick around and I can offer any help with anything we did in class today or on the assignment. If you're all good, then have a great week. And remember, your assignment is due Sunday night. If you need help, please reach out to me before the weekend. I'm not going to be available this weekend. I have to go out of town. Okay, so happy to help, but during the week, please. Okay, I will post today's files up to GitHub in just a moment. Yes, Sarah.